journey beyond imposter syndrome. This is where I invite you into a space where high achievers and spiritual leaders converge to redefine success and self-worth. By sharing transformative stories and engaging with thought leaders, this podcast serves as a roadmap for navigating the complexities of imposter syndrome. It's an intimate look into overcoming personal barriers tailored for those who value wisdom, leadership, and intuition in business and life. Join me at the Humble Warrior Podcast with Alani Bankhead. Welcome to the Humble Warrior Podcast. I'm your host, Alani Bankhead, and I am so excited today to have Stephen Epting, who is a top cybersecurity voice on LinkedIn. And he's also an information security and digital forensic specialist. He's also a former police detective and technology enthusiast. And he's here with us today to talk about all things job transition, cybersecurity, all the craziness. I'm so excited to have you. Thank you so much, Stephen, for coming.
Oh, you're welcome. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So we're going to jump right in. Tell me a little bit about your story. Like, you used to be in law enforcement, now you're in cybersecurity. Like, how did all of this stuff happen?
Yeah, just to start from the beginning, many moons ago, I grew up in a small town of Anderson, South Carolina, which I'm not sure if you know where Greenville is, South Carolina.
Mm-mm.
So easiest way to explain it, it's 2 hours from Charlotte, 2 hours from Atlanta, 2 hours from Gatlinburg. Like we're right in
Okay.
the center, right at the mountains. Professionally, it's been kind of a journey just because after high school, I really didn't have any goals or direction. Like I knew I didn't want to go to college, but that was just kind of a tough call because my dad, my mom, my two brothers, they all went to college for like engineering and law degrees. But after that, I just got pretty much into the workforce. I worked retail jobs. I did GameStop, Ruby Tuesday, Aaron Sales and Lease. I did retail management, a lot of sales. And in between that period, decided to have a kid, which she's 14 now. So lots of attitude. But like I was working at Aaron's, I just kind of felt a strong pull to go in law enforcement and help people out because when you work in sales, you're helping people, but you're not really helping people. There's always some kind of reason for it, whether you want to get the commission or what. But I think that going to law enforcement, I figure I could help people and also I could drive fast. So, legally.
Yes.
So, so I did that.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That actually resonates so much because, we go to FLETC, so the Federal Law Enforcement Training
Let's see
Center
in
for,
Charleston.
yes, that's right. There's a FLETC in Charleston.
Yep.
So for those who don't know what FLETC is, it's like the basic schoolhouse for federal law enforcement. But one of my favorite things about it was we got to drive really fast in souped up Dodge Chargers. And that was amazing. So the whole driving fast legally
Yeah.
thing,
Well,
totally get it.
we had Caprices, which they have things on the cars
Oh.
named the things on the cars called Governor. I'm not sure if you've heard of that. It
Hmm.
basically like limits what you have, but we did not have those. So we would go on Highway 17 like 150, 160 miles per hour, like going to calls and stuff, like justified. But
100%. You did it safely. You're
but
trained.
yeah, but like when you go that fast, it's almost like you're sliding on ice. But yeah, it was crazy just to go that fast, and I don't know. It was just cool, but doing law enforcement, I was a deputy there for about 5 years in Charleston, and I got kind of homesick. Like I got tired of the traffic there, just with all the tourist calls. Charleston's a beach town, tourist destination. So I moved back to Greenville, Anderson area, and got a job with the Greenville Police, which was a great agency, like really, really good paying. Going back to Greenville, I kind of knew I wanted to do investigations because I had 5 years of patrol experience at the time. So I knew I wanted to go to investigations, but just being the new guy, I knew I would have to do a few years on the road at Greenville, kind of learn the area, learn how they do things. So 2.5 years, I went to investigations. I did property crimes like burglaries, thefts, shopliftings, just really, really minor stuff. Then, about 6 months after that, I was asked to move to crimes against children, which we worked physical, sexual abuse case against children anywhere from 0 to 17. We worked missing and exploited children cases, runaways, missing kids. And we also worked juvenile crimes, just anytime a kid 10 to 17 committed a crime, we basically processed those and dealt with family court as liaisons, which when you're talking with juvenile crimes, there's just an entirely different way to handle it just because they go to juvenile court and it's totally completely different. But I had the good fortune to be asked to work ICAT cases, which for people that don't know that is Internet Crimes Against Children. Chris Hansen, undercover, pose as poses kids online trying to lure people out. So I got to do that on top of everything else, which I enjoyed it. I really liked working with the computers and stuff and that aspect of it, which I didn't like working the child pornography side of things, like having to look at it. And after you look at it, you have to go talk to the people whose phone it came off of. But I did that until about 2022 when I was approached about working digital forensics for cases because everybody has a cell phone now and you'd be surprised all the good evidence that's on there. People take pictures of crime scenes, take pictures of sexual assault, sexual abuse. People take, and also your phone have GPS locations too, so you can actually tie them to an incident. And you get all
Yes.
that from extracting it, which we use Celebrite, which is a really well-known mobile forensics program, which very user-friendly, very good, but I got all those certifications. So I did that on top of Crimes Against Kids and ICAC. So I was pretty busy all the time. Um,
Yes.
but doing the forensics was kind of like the shift in my mentality. It was like I really liked doing that the most, but I didn't have enough time because I had everything else to do. And like the forensic work kind of took a sidestep to the crimes against kids case, obviously, because you have an abused kid, you have a phone. Like which one do you pick? Obviously, you're going to pick the kid.
Right.
But the more I did forensics, the more I loved it and started wanting to do it full time. And at the time, it's kind of embarrassing to admit, but I was having some mental health issues from just working at the child pornography cases. Like it's undescribable, like what you have to look at, what these kids go through. It makes you mad. You have nightmares at night. Just really, really, really strenuous work. And unfortunately, I was getting really burned out at a high, high rate working law enforcement, which I know a lot of other cops and military deal with that. Then I did a lot of like personal and looking, like I looked at some of the senior officers that were there like 25, 30 years, and they just like looked fucking miserable. Like they looked like shit. They're like 50 years old, but they have bags on their eye. Like very knowledgeable people is just I just didn't want that for me because they had sacrificed everything for the community. And I was just getting to a point where I just didn't really feel like I was getting to a point where I didn't care. And working with kids, I was like, yeah, it's a time for me to step out. Like it's just not worth it anymore.
Yeah,
So
actually, can I interrupt real quick
yeah,
because you've already mentioned so much great stuff in there, but I just want to highlight what you were saying. Well, first you caveated the beginning of this last piece by saying, like, I'm a little embarrassed to admit this, but
yeah,
but the reality is that this is the norm for people who work in the sex crime space or work in very difficult spaces. And so if you're listening to this and you're new to that space or you've been in it for a little bit, these types of conversations are abnormal at the unit, but these are the types of conversations we need to be having. And so I've had the incredible privilege of being able to train law enforcement and justice system professionals, well, and different types of professionals all over the world. And I see the same themes popping up on the justice side. And I would say roughly on average, it's about 2 years. If I can get an ICAC investigator or analyst to stick around for
yeah.
that long, it's like
They
a
don't stay long.
miracle. Right. And so for those of you who are burned out and recognizing within yourself these things that Stephen's talking about, so the burnout, looking at your bosses. So that's a great tool actually is like, look at your future, right? And the leadership that you have. Is that what you want to look like? If not, that's an opportunity for self-reflection, which is what Stephen did. And then,
Yeah,
oh, go ahead.
and I also say like I'm kind of embarrassed to admit too, but I've had to reach out to EAP before too. Just the nightmares and like just the sleepless nights, just the worry like you feel for
Right,
these kids because
right,
like you get CP sometimes and you don't know where that kid's at. It's just a picture in their possession. Like, is that kid okay? Like, where are they at?
right, right. No, totally. And I can definitely resonate with that because I felt you have that feeling of like somebody has to go find
Helpless.
this kid, right? Yeah. And and who was doing it. And if it's not anybody, then I'm responsible for that. And how do I do that? And so yeah, it can become all consuming, which leads to the burnout. And so, for those listeners, Stephen's saying, it got to the point where I realized I didn't care, which doesn't mean he doesn't care, but he's recognizing the apathy in his body that is popping up as a result of the burnout. And this is normal. So I love that for you. You were self-aware enough to be like, I need to make a change because this is not healthy. Like, I do care and I should care. And there are a lot of people, unfortunately, who stay in I don't care mode,
You see a lot of
and
them.
a lot of it. And it's very counterproductive.
And the
So,
way I thought about it too is just like, if my daughter, God forbid, she was ever sexually assaulted, would I want a detective working her case that didn't give a shit? Like, fuck no.
dude,
Like,
exactly. Yes. Oh my gosh. But for those of you listening, like, I love just this little piece of the conversation, even though this isn't why we're here exactly, but just all these things. Like, he's a seasoned detective. I'm a seasoned special agent. Whether you're in child sex crimes or in another, a medical, some other field that is deeply of service, burnout is normal and expected. And the question is, are you aware of how to identify if you're sliding into burnout, and what are you going to do to get out of it? And so Stephen's already identified some really great tools. So self-awareness, he identified looking at those future leaders to see, is that where I want to be down the road? If not, what changes do I have to make? He also identified the self-reflection piece I thought was really good. So are very honed into your body when it's telling you, ooh, I like digital forensics. Like cat cases, those are cool, but like I really like digital forensics. So tell me a little bit more so this must have been the beginning of the end that got you into
yeah, it was.
cybersecurity.
It was a nail in the coffin because,
Yeah.
and I'll talk about it a little bit later, but the guy that does the forensics at the department, when I was there, like, he wasn't exactly the easiest to talk to. So, like, I had a hard time, like, learning from him. And, like, I can take classes online, but, like, to me, I have to get my hands dirty to kind of learn something. I face a lot of challenges in that department, but I just started doing some research on my own. Is like, is there a job for forensics? Like, do people do this? So, long story short, yes, they do. So at that point, I was burned out. I would come home and need like an hour and a half to decompress and not talk to anyone. Like, I would just sleep. I would dread coming to work. I would like lose sleep over like, oh man, in what cases am I going to get tomorrow? Like, I have to do this. I have a search warrant I have to execute. Is everyone going to show up? Is, someone going to shoot me? Like, it's just a lot of stuff you have to deal with, like, logistically. But at that point, I was just like, you know what? It's just time for me to move on. Let me job hunt. And I tried to tackle the job hunt very tactfully. I asked myself, like, what do I have that other people don't? Because looking at LinkedIn, looking at Reddit, like, there's a billion different tech certifications you can get. And there's people that are unemployed that have like a lot of them. And these certifications, they cost $200 to $1,500 a piece for a piece of paper saying that you know this. So I did several different things, but I feel like law enforcement gave me soft skills because I would interview the pedophiles, criminals, witnesses, victims, child victims. I've been trained in forensic interviewing. Uh, but one thing I did too is like job hunting is like, I'm gonna be different. I'm not gonna spray and pray my resume because like on paper my resume probably looks like shit. Like, I don't really have any tech experience outside the 2 years of, the mobile forensics. So what I did is I connected to people on LinkedIn. I would pick, I would ask them like, hey, like, this on your profile is pretty cool. Like, on you, I said, hey, like, I like tech badass, or you had like badass in your profile
I
title. I was like,
do.
hey, that's like, you got the balls to do that. Like, I respect that. And I would talk to people like that, just normal. Like, a lot of time on LinkedIn, you see people talk like super professionally, and it's just, to me, kind of himself kind of like fake. Like, just be normal. But I would ask them for like a 10-15 minute phone call. And once I did that, I quickly realized that people don't have soft skills. So I was like, well, I'm putting myself out there. I have the soft skills. Let me take advantage of it. So what I did was I took classes. I learned a lot of the technical skills like that I didn't know because there's a lot to computers. Working with cybersecurity, saying like you want to work in law enforcement, like okay, there's a million different things you could do with it. But I would call people every day, just pick their brain and like, what's your favorite thing about your company? Like, what advice would you give to a newbie? I was very humble. Like, I would never beg for a job. I would just say, well, like, thank you for your time. Just, it really means a lot to me that you took the time out of your day to talk to me. And another thing I did too was I found the companies I liked. I creeped on their recruiters and their executive staff, and I messaged all of them and talked to them. To me, it was like an open source investigation, and that's how I kind of viewed it. But I also went to
Yes.
cyber. Huh?
Oh, no, sorry. I'm so sorry. I just got really excited. And before we continue, because there's a lot in here that I think is super powerful and really useful for the audience. So first, actually, a clarification question for me. You said you arranged these 10 to 15 minute phone calls, and you said you recognize a lot of people didn't have these soft skills. Do you mean like the people you were talking to didn't have the soft skills, or
Yes,
like,
people I was
okay,
talking to, like they were kind of awkward. Just if you imagine an IT person like in her head, like that's who I was talking to.
okay.
To some level, but a lot of them were good talkers. They were very friendly, but like a lot of them were just kind of awkward to talk to, and like like, hey, what's your favorite thing about your company? Like getting paid. Like okay then, like I mean that's good, I guess. I mean I like getting paid too,
Right, right.
but it was just
Okay.
kind of tough talking to them, and like you kind of had to force the conversation, and it's like I wonder how well they communicate with their teammates. Like,
Yes.
are they able to talk to them? Like, what's the deal?
So in the event that you had one of these very awkward conversations, would you then arrive to a decision point like, oh, I don't want to work on that team, or like what, how did that inform your decision making moving forward?
Um, I I'm the kind of the person like I'm not gonna judge an entire team by one bad apple. Like, just because he's not good at soft skills doesn't mean the team isn't.
Mhm.
If they can't say anything nice about the company, I would probably like think of everyone should say something nice about the company they work for. Like, everyone likes one thing about their company other than pay.
Right.
Like, I could probably name like 20 things at the police department I liked. I like the people. I liked all the side job opportunities. I like my desk. I like
Driving
my
really fast in the
driving really
Caprice.
fast. There was a lot of cool training opportunities. Like
Yeah,
the Greenville Police paid for my digital forensic training, which I'll be forever grateful because that was like a pivotal moment in my career.
for sure, for sure.
Uh,
And so for those of you who are listening, I love that he brought this up because I do career coaching a little bit to help get people in certain, like government positions or whatever. And this is something that comes up a lot where I tell people, I'm like, hey, the companies that you love or the organizations you love, go on LinkedIn, search for that organization, and I literally will be like, connect, 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 connect to
that's what I did.
everybody. Yeah. And then
Ding, 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 ding.
right. And if your profile looks interesting, I'll write you and be like, hey, can I pick your brain for a little bit? Like, and I've hired people that way. So people who reach out to me and they're like, I love your organization. How do I want to do this kind of role? And I'm like, why don't you come over for coffee? We'll introduce you to some people and like we suss them out. And if we like them, it's send your resume over and you're hired?
Yeah. So I connected with a guy solely because he had former child in his title.
Oh, what? Okay. What story time?
Yeah, so this guy was a coder, but like I was just like doing what you're doing, like connect, 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 connect. Then I see a guy that popped up on the feed and it says like his job title was, then like, line that it said former child.
Oh my gosh.
I was like, and I was like, I'm gonna connect to this guy. And I'm gonna give him kudos on that because
Yeah.
that I got a good laugh out of that. I was like,
Yeah.
anyone that makes me laugh is gonna get a connection request.
Dude, I love that. And so for those listening, because I hear all the time how networking is so stressful, right? And I get it. Like I used to think networking sucked and it was just people trying to figure out how they could use each other and stuff. But what I'm hearing, Stephen, you specifically say is it was more a vehicle of curiosity and
Yeah.
connection than anything else. And
Yeah, and that's
so,
like it's not like I don't expect this guy to give me a job or anything like that. And that's why when
Right.
I talk to people, I never ask for a job. I'm not looking for that.
Right.
Like I really just wanted knowledge and
Right.
insight from people that are professional. But that guy ended up being really cool, and we talked for a
Yeah.
bit. And actually, I think I ended up video talking to him, not to ask for a job, just
Right.
to get his insights on things and like what advice would you have and like just stuff like that.
I
But
love that.
one thing I'd also ask people is like, hey, like how'd you get your job? Like how'd you get your foot in the door? Because that's what I'm trying to do. About
Yeah.
80% said referrals or networking.
And that's what it is. And it's so funny because you tell people, they're like, I really want to get a job. Oh, especially in ICAC or human trafficking. People are always like, Alani, I want to do what you do. How do you do it? I'm like, network. And they're like, not like that. And I'm like, that's how you do it. Like, let me explain how I got all these other jobs. And it was all my network or a referral
Yeah.
or like, but
People
people,
talk.
people 100% talk. And I think to that end, it's important that your integrity and your reputation be solid because people talk. And when they're like, oh, Steven's looking for a job. Hey, do you know Steven? Hey, we're connected on LinkedIn. Like, do you know this guy? What do you like? What can you tell me about him? And
Yeah.
so all that stuff, those soft skills that you're talking about is so important. Okay,
I would
sorry. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I would argue soft skills are just as important as technical skills in cybersecurity because you got to work with your team, you got to work with people just taking their stuff or doing anything really, like talking to your boss, like asking
Yes.
questions, like
Yes.
if someone's in the middle of something, you can't say like, hey, dude, like help me out with this now. Like, no, that's
Yes.
gonna piss them off. Like, you be respectful, say, hey, I see that you're busy, but if you get a second, could you help walk me through this so I can do it on
Yeah.
my own now?
Yeah.
And they'll say, yeah, like I can help you a little bit, or yeah, let me show you real quick.
Y-
And if they get pissed off for me asking for help, there's nothing I can do about that. It just
r-
is what it is. Like,
Right. And do you take that personally ever out of curiosity?
no, I mean,
Okay.
that's on them. It's not on me. Like, I'm just asking for help. Like, I was nice about it. Like, there's
Right.
nothing, I
Right.
mean, I was respectful, I was nice. Like, if they get mad, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
bud. Like,
Well, and I appreciate that because I think there are a lot of people who try like they get the courage up to reach out in that way and they either get no response or they get rejected and they feel like they're personally being rejected and I try to explain to them I'm like I wouldn't look at it that way. I would just look at it as that's not the right opportunity you need to be expending
yeah.
energy on.
And I talk to people that get really bummed out when they don't get a job. It's just like, well, fuck them, move on. Like
Yeah, right.
next, like go next. It wasn't meant to be. Like,
Right.
like, do you really want a company to work for a company that's gonna deny you anyways?
100%.
Like,
Okay, I love this like fuck 'em move on mentality. Have you always been this way?
no.
Okay, tell me a little bit. How
So,
did you get here?
so I'll have to. So that's one of my imposter syndrome stories. So kind of jumping ahead. So transition to law enforcement. Whenever you had an issue with a computer, or probably even the military, like you call somebody, like, hey, this isn't working. Let me call IT. So going from law enforcement to tech, it's like, man, shit, like I'm having this issue. Like, I don't want to call anyone because I work in tech now. Like, are they gonna think I'm stupid? So, like when I got there, like I didn't like stuff wasn't working, stuff wasn't I was getting like incidents to work and stuff like that, and I really didn't know how to do it. So I didn't want to ask the senior people because like you want to seem like you're knowledgeable and that you want to be where you're supposed to be. And you also don't want to bother anyone because like you don't want to ask a stupid question. But like then you start thinking it's like, man, like, am I even really qualified for this question? Like, if I can't figure XYZ out, am I even qualified to be here? It seems so basic. Like, what if, you know, am I where someone with my experience should be? Did my coworkers have these struggles? Like, why does everything look so easy for everyone else? Did I make a mistake? Like, am I going to get fired if I fuck something up? Like, I think that's one of the things I struggled with, and I still struggle with it at times, but it's kind of eased out a little bit as more I learn more. But the biggest thing I've kind of learned going to IT is just research the issue the best you can. Google that shit. I'm sure you probably heard that. And also just kind of give myself some slack as like, I'm good at tech, but I'm not some kind of tech Jesus. Like I don't know everything. I'm never going to know everything. There's always something to learn. There's a billion different aspects to computers, networking, cybersecurity, forensics. There's penetration testing. There's all kinds of stuff you can do. So one thing I did is just kind of look up my knowledge base a year ago. It's like, man, I know a lot more than I did a year ago. And I've made a lot of progress kind of reflecting. And I still have that drive to learn. I take classes every day. Like I watch YouTube videos. I follow cyber trends, like cyber threats. Like the CrowdStrike thing was a big thing I've researched because that shut the world down essentially.
Yep.
But I think one thing I did to overcome it, I can't speak for everyone, is just take a step back and reevaluate yourself, your progress. Like to me, I'm new at this job just like everyone else was at some point. I'm never going to know everything. If you can show me once, I can replicate it. But if I make small progress each day, that adds up to a lot of progress.
Yes.
And
I'm sorry to interrupt, but
no,
I
that
think
was actually it for my imposter story. But
I just think that's such an important point, and I want to break that down a little bit more because so when you're experiencing imposter syndrome, it's ultimately victim mode, right? Because your brain's telling you you're not good enough and here are all the reasons why. So you may as well not even try because you
yeah,
suck.
or fire, they're
And
going to fire me.
right, are they going to fire me? Like all these horrible things are going to happen. And so when we look at how the brain is, it's 2024, but it's still operating in prehistoric times in a lot of different
Yeah.
ways. And when your imposter syndrome kicks up, it is a survival mechanism. So your brain and your body are doing exactly what it's supposed to do to preserve your life, right?
Yeah.
And so you're thinking all these catastrophic events. So back in the day, it would have been like, there's a saber-toothed tiger, or like, we don't have food, or, whatever it might be. And so it makes sense that your body's like, I don't have this. And why am I not qualified? And, all the lacking, right? That scarcity mindset. And I want to highlight that because people beat themselves up all the time for feeling that way, but the reality is that's what your body's supposed to do when you're doing something big. It's telling you don't try, you're going to fail. It's tied to your life purpose. You may as well
Mm.
stay safe and don't take action, right? And so for you, what you just described is you stepped out of that ego for a second and you looked at the bigger picture. So you looked at the strategic kind of timeline of, okay, let me stop first and look at where was I a year ago? Oh, a year ago,
Yeah.
I didn't even have that certification. And now I'm here and I'm employed and like I do research and I learn every day. And
Hmm.
so I have progressed, right? I'm not perfect. I don't know how to fix this broken thing here or whatever, but I do know a little bit about it. I love how you were like, Google that shit. That's a tool, and we're gonna write it just like that on the show notes. Like,
Yeah.
Google that shit.
That's a that's a common IT saying.
It's a technical term, you guys.
Yeah.
But I also love,
GTS.
yeah, GTS. But I also love that you mentioned Google. Initially, you said when you were thinking about transitioning, you Googled like who's done stuff that I want to do. And so you were opening up your perspective to what was possible. Because if someone's already done the unimaginable for you, then it's a little bit easier to be like, oh, well, if they could do it, I can probably figure it out,
Yeah.
right? And so grace is another tool for yourself. So being patient and compassionate and recognizing where you were compared to where you are. We have GTS and then getting better every day. So just constantly working on yourself a
Yeah.
little bit at a time.
And the way I always described it is you have to have that thirst. Like you got to learn always, especially in cybersecurity, because now we have like AI that's emerging and getting really big. Like
Yeah.
it's just you can't stop learning. You have to have that thirst to want to do better every day, learn a new skill, and just be the best version you can. Because like I'm not where I want to be right now, but I know where I want to be in a year. Like I want to be better at what I do. I want to handle certain responsibilities. I think having short-term and long-term goals are important. Like what do you have to do? Like what's all the stopping points to get to that? Like
Yes.
like learn this, learn that. I don't as much get certifications anymore, but I do take classes just to learn.
Yes.
Because the certifications are insanely expensive, and
Right.
to me, it's just like this piece of paper or just knowing what to do. Like
Yes.
to me, I would rather just know what to do and not have a fancy piece of paper that costs $1,500.
Right.
Because
Totally.
that's just really expensive. But I
Yes,
was
it is.
fortunate enough. I started job hunting in July 23. I met a guy on LinkedIn that used to work for my department. Very nice dude, like would give you the shirt off his back, and I'll be forever grateful to him. He let me know about a job at this government agency, and he knew a guy that used to work ICAC. I was like, okay, that's my hook. So I called this guy and we talked about ICAC, and I just told him like, hey, I'm doing forensics now. I love it. I want to do full time. Like I'm kind of looking to transition away from law enforcement. Got me an interview. I got it, and it was history after that. And I
Dude,
just
okay. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt again, but that's
no,
so good. Okay. Asking for help. A lot of people with imposter syndrome struggle with asking for help. So you're like, this guy, I know this guy, he's super nice and he's connected to this guy. And like, that's the agency I want to work with. Like, what had to happen in your head for you to be like, I'm going to ask my buddy for help?
I think you have to kind of look at it as like a stepping stone. Like, hey, I liked both guys, but the guy's name is his name's Chris, but he wants to help. If someone's willing to help me, like get to my goal, I'm gonna accept it. Like he was cool enough to help me. The other guy, he was cool enough to help me get the interview. Like if they're willing to help me, I'll take it. Like, I never begged for jobs.
Right,
I would just kind of like we'd talk tech, just like nerd stuff,
right, right.
like and just kind of build a rapport with them and
I
just
love that.
yeah, just I didn't mind asking for help because I even really didn't have to ask for help because he knew what I was looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was friends with him, he said, hey, like, I think this job might be a good fit for Steven.
Yes.
And he connected me to the person that helped me get me in. So I
Yes.
got my job by referral.
I love that. Okay. And for the listener, because this is obvious to Stephen, it's not obvious to a lot of you. So Stephen asked for help. And thankfully, this situation is they were buddies, like they already had a rapport, right? It wasn't like a cold call or anything. But I think what was clutch in your story is that you said, I accepted the help.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people with imposter syndrome are like, I don't want to be a bother. And me included. Like this is something I've always struggled with is I'm like, hey, like I'll help anybody, but when it comes to me asking for help from my community, I struggle with that. But you're
Yeah.
really good at saying, no, actually, like I know this guy
Well,
wants to help me. Yeah, go
I
ahead.
don't always like asking for help calls. Like, there's that perception that you're going to look weak if you ask for help. Like, no one wants to be weak, especially like in a military or law enforcement type position. Like,
Right.
no one wants to be that guy that's has to get pulled out. But this Chris guy, the one that connected me to the job, like I met him on LinkedIn. I never worked with him. Like he worked
Wow.
at the same agency but different time.
Yeah.
And I saw that he was in cybersecurity, so like I stalked him a little bit and I sent him a message and I did the same thing I did with everyone else. Hey, like, hey dude, are you open for like a 10-15 minute call? Like I want to know what you did so I can replicate it.
Okay. Okay. And that's amazing. So then let's continue on. So how did you get so he hooked you up with this job? Is that what ended up happening?
I interviewed for it, but
Okay.
uh I just had one panel interview, which I mean, I worked in law enforcement. It's no stranger for me. I did some research about the government agency before I went there, like how many end users they have, how much staff they have, their mission statement, like how big their IT department is. Like, I think it's really important to do research when you go in there so you can just spout off, like, hey, like, what do you know about this agency? Like, well, I know that you have, X amount of end users. I know that you use this system. I know that you have this many employees. I know this is your mission statement, and this is how I can help you accomplish that mission statement. And you have to be confident. And I'll tell you this, on my interview, I bombed a technical question that they asked me, and
Tell
I
okay,
told
you got to tell us.
I can't recall exactly what the question was because I brain dumped it, probably
Okay.
because of some kind of trauma.
You blocked it.
But
Yeah.
I did tell them, said I don't have the answer for that right now, but I would research it and see if I could find a solution from other people. And if I couldn't do that, I would ask a senior person for help or guidance so I could move past it in the future.
Right. So then okay, you quote unquote bomb that question and then what happened? You did the panel and then what?
then I got an email saying, "Hey, like take this background check and here's your conditional offer." And it ended
Wow.
up being a substantial pay increase, which was great because, police officers don't really get paid a whole lot. But so it was a game changer for me. Like, I don't know, like I don't even remember what I did when I read that, but I was very, very excited, and it's a good gig. I definitely plan on staying there.
Yes,
Uh,
I love
I
that.
like my team. I like everything about it. The equipment they give, the responsibilities. Like
Yeah,
I still get to help out people when they need it on a much less scale, not a life
sure.
or death scale, but
Sure.
like I'm still helping people.
Right.
This family home life got better because I'm not spending an hour and a half dreading the next case, and
Right.
my back started feeling better because I'm not wearing all the shit.
Yeah.
Just just my whole mental health got a lot better within probably 2 weeks. Like, and
Whoa.
I still struggle with some stuff, but
Sure.
like I was just happy doing what I'm doing. Like, glad to be away from certain aspects of law enforcement, just where, you know, if something happens, like you could get called out for a public safety emergency. Like this hurricane that we had in the upstate Carolinas, like if I was in law enforcement, I would have been there, like with trees everywhere. But no, I was at home, living my best life without internet or
Yeah.
power,
Yep.
with
Yep.
all three dogs, three cats, and chickens I got.
Oh, dude, I have a loved one who just got back from there because they had to run protection missions for the FEMA chemists because they were getting death
Hmm.
threats. Like insane. But anyway,
Yeah, it's crazy time. Had a training in FEMA like 2 weeks ago.
yeah, it's super nuts. But yeah, to your point, so you're able to help people in a different way. You're still scratching that itch, right? It might
Hmm.
not feel as quote unquote amazing as pulling a kid out of a really dangerous situation or something,
No, but I'm
but
happy.
you're happy, you're helping, you're still fulfilling that life purpose of serving your community in a way that is fulfilling for you, and your mental health is improved, your family life is better, you're getting
Yeah.
paid more, like
You can't help other people if you can't help yourself. Like
100%.
at the end of the day, like I have to look out for myself more than anyone. Cause if I'm a piece of shit, like I'm gonna have piece of shit work.
Yeah,
Like it just
totally.
the it just all goes out there. Like
Yep.
you have to take care of yourself.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and it's so funny you say that because I mentioned I do the career coaching sometimes and I'll get entry level professionals who are like, I just want to help people when I ask them what they want to do. I'm like, you could pick up garbage for a living. Like, why do
Yeah,
you want to work ICAC?
you
You
can
know? And
help
they're like,
people for volunteering for free.
exactly. And they're like, I just want to help. I'm like, what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. Like, you have to be very clear about what specific elements do you want to help people with, because that's going to inform these decisions that we're talking about,
Yeah,
where
it's not all
maybe
candy and rainbows.
exactly. And one of the things that I see, which is a problem in the field that we don't talk about, and it's not limited to law enforcement, it's social workers, it's prosecutors, it's judges, it's all kinds
Nonprofits,
of
child
nonprofits,
child
is
advocacy centers are a big one.
100%, but that they all experience burnout the same way that we do,
Mhm.
but they don't have the luxury of having an off-ramp because we as a system don't prepare them to transition when the time is right for them, right? When you're feeling burned out. So out of curiosity, we're at the point where you're like, after the panel, I got an email, they asked me to do a background check, and I got a conditional job offer. So was it you got that and then you quit the police department, or had you already quit?
No, I was still there. I gave them a 4 week notice
Okay.
because like I really like the partners I worked with. So
Yes.
my intention of giving them a 4 week notice was to let them train somebody to take my spot, which didn't happen, but because
Sure.
personnel
Right.
issues, but
Right.
I wanted to give them plenty of time to
To
train someone,
transition.
or
Yeah.
if I needed to pass, because I think I had closed most of my cases, but there were still a few that I
Yeah.
wanted to prepare people for.
Yes.
Uh,
And so I'm curious then, because like we're talking about transitions, right? So in large part, overcoming the self doubt and the fear of that transition, and even as you transition into the new job. But a lot of people that I work with, as we're thinking through, should I stay or should I go? I have a special product that I do. It's like a one time session where we figure out, are you burned out and you really need to go? Or do we need to make some adjustments to your self-care plan and then you stay because you love it? But one of the biggest barriers to transitioning is finances. So for
Yeah.
you, it sounds like did you have any financial plan in place to be able to
So
weather that?
when I was transitioning, I had like X amount the minimum I could take, and there was no maximum obviously, but like I had a minimum number that I had that I was willing to take because I figured I would get like a smaller like entry level role which paid less, but I knew I had X amount that I minimum I had to make.
Mhm.
Luckily it didn't come to that, but I was prepared to take a pay cut if I needed to, just to get my foot in the door because sometimes getting your foot in the door in a new career field is very hard, which if you go to Reddit, like any IT Reddit or cybersecurity, it's all doom and gloom, like, fuck this career field and just very, very negative people, which I usually tried to avoid that because
Yeah.
it's just a big, sob fest. People
Not
just,
helpful. Yeah.
yeah, and it's just like, well, okay, well, like, why? Like, if you're crying about it so much here, like, how does that translate to your work ethic? Or, yeah, I avoided Reddit because it was a downer, and it's like, there's already so many downers. Like, I need positivity.
Right.
I want to surround myself by people that are, hey, let's do this. They're motivated, they're passionate. Like you don't want to work with somebody that's just like a Debbie Downer and just negative and it's just their drag.
Right.
Like
Well, and
it's a
you're the average of the people you spend time with anyway.
yeah, yeah, I
So
agree.
for those of you who are looking to make a transition, and I know a lot of you are interested in cybersecurity because I've gotten notes from you guys, is make sure that you're spending time in places that uplift you, inspire, and encourage you. So avoid, it sounds like the Reddit IT pages,
Yeah.
because you need to be encouraged. It's tough to
It can happen.
transition.
I mean, you just have to put the work in. Like nothing
Yeah.
comes without work. Like you're not gonna reap like job offers just don't get thrown at you for, being nice looking and dressing nice and
Right.
like you have to
Right.
work at it and set yourself apart and
Totally.
like
Totally.
really work on the soft skills.
Yeah. So
Like
soft skills are really important.
public speaking sucks, but you know, I'm not sure if you ever heard of Toastmasters
Of
International.
course. Yes, of
So
course.
Toastmasters International is an organization that lets you do public speaking. Do you speak in front of a group? They have to clap. It's kind of corny, but it's built to build your confidence, which I did that. And, I've been to court. I've talked in front of juries. I've talked in front of attorneys. I've been grilled by attorneys. Just public speaking is just so huge, and you have to know how to talk to people.
I'm a big fan of Toastmasters. No, that's solid. We'll make sure to link them in the show notes as well. So, unfortunately, we're running out of time. I have so many questions,
I know.
but so let's back up to something because there's been this element weaved into the conversation that I want to touch on real quick. And it started with, when you first came on, you said I had a strong pull to law enforcement. And then later on, you were talking about the ICAC versus the digital forensics. You're like, I really felt drawn to the digital forensic stuff.
Mhm.
And you talked about having this strong like desire to push yourself and, be better every single day. So these are all like spiritual, metaphysical elements.
Mhm.
And so they're intangibles. Like we know that that's there because there's something internally driving you. Out of curiosity, for those who are working on how do I better develop a relationship with myself and that mechanism, right? What is that? How did you develop it? How do you interact with it?
I think to a degree, you just have to be kind of empathetic to people, like and saying like, hey, that guy's an asshole or whatever. If he cuts you off, it's like, well, maybe he just had a bad day. Like, people aren't always bad, but I think you just have to kind of learn yourself. And, people probably aren't going to like this, but you have to take care of your body too. Like, your physical health goes a long way with your mental health, which, I'm not one of those guys that likes working out, but I do it because I have to, because, you know, my body contains my brain. I need my brain.
Right,
And
right.
like, you just have to take care of yourself because I just turned 40 a few months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And like, you just have to take care of yourself and be in your best physical health so you can, be mentally healthy
Totally.
because my sleep's gotten way better when I got healthier and just like your
Right.
your thoughts are a lot clearer when you're not eating a bunch of shit. Like I mean, I love it. I could eat a whole pizza right now, but Yeah.
Right. Right, dude.
But it's not
Seriously.
like it's just not like that. I think you just have to take care of yourself and just kind of know yourself. Like when I diet, it's like, okay, I'm not a big breakfast person, but I like a good dinner. Like I
Hmm.
need to be full at night. So, okay, well, I'm gonna diet in the morning. I'm gonna eat light in the for lunch, then I'm gonna have a big dinner. So I think you just have to kind of know yourself and you know your body and
Yeah. Yeah.
like
So what I'm hearing you say is when I take care of the foundation, so when I take care of my physical body, I'm better connected to my intuition.
yeah, it'll also make you more confident too, just when you feel great and you know
Yeah.
you can like look down without looking at your gut. Uh,
Right.
it makes you more confident. Just that hey, I look good, or hey, I'm well put together. Just you have to take care of yourself and kind of know yourself. And
Totally.
I don't know if I have any really secret how to like learn how to learn yourself. That's kind of subjective, but like what one thing I would do is like I think especially working ICAC, you have to have hobbies. You have to have something outside law enforcement. Like I would go on hikes by myself. There's lots of mountains near here. I would go and I would sit under a waterfall like, they do in the movies, like where the water's just hitting your head and you're like sitting down. Like, cause to me, like I just felt at peace when I was in nature. I still feel like that, but
Oh, nature's a big one for you. Okay. Well,
yeah,
and I know you caveated it, but the point is to get your perspective because everybody's a little bit different, right? So some people are like, that voice is like God or the Holy Spirit. But I do work with people who are like, nature's my thing. When I'm in nature, I'm clear-headed, like the ideas come to me, or, like I know for me, there's something about putting my toes in grass
I
that
agree. Like I walk
it's
barefoot in the rivers.
yeah, right. And you can call it magical, you can call it
It's a
God, like
smell.
whatever, right? Like it can be a lot of different things, but I think we're so disconnected from that. But there is a metaphysical element, right? So like one example that I bring up every once in a while on the podcast and in talks is, when we talk about ICAC and that world, and I tell people some of the stats from the ops that I've done, I'll ask the crowd, do you believe that the work that we did in the arrests stopped the abuse of other children? And
Mhm.
everybody's like, absolutely. Like, we know that you did it. I'm like, but what proof do you have? And they're like, I don't have proof. And I'm like, that's an example of like a spiritual practice, right? Where you
Yeah.
know that the effect of the work you do has bigger ripple effects than you're ever going to see
Yeah.
kind of thing. And so that's where we're kind of trying to dig into because you're very clear in your intention and your intuition. So for somebody who's listening to your story saying, I want to be like that, like how did he know that he wanted to be law enforcement? How do you cultivate that relationship with yourself? And so first we have learn yourself, take care of your body. You have incredible self-awareness, and that takes time too, right? Of like, I know for me it was my intuition would be chirping at me about so like this person's got red flags, like don't let them on the team. And I'd
Yeah.
be like, no, they're nice, I don't have any proof that they're bad. And then lo and behold, they wreck things. And then I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, I should have listened to my gut, not going to do that. Like now I know what it sounds like, I'm not going to
But
do
there's
that
a
again.
lesson in that though. Like there's always lessons to learn from that. Like even every failure has a lesson in it. Like
100%.
and I've failed a lot. I'm sure you failed a lot as different things. Just
All the time.
you can't be afraid of failure because you're gonna have failure. Like if I apply a job and I don't get it, that's not a failure. It's just or if I interview for a job and I don't get it, like,
Yeah.
hey, well, at least I got practice interviewing. Like
Right.
you just have to kind of look at the positive sometimes. Sometimes
Right.
things just aren't meant to be. Like
Right. Right.
just look at failures as learning opportunities. Like,
For
what could I have done
sure.
better? What did I do good?
For
Like,
sure.
you can't beat up on yourself. You have to kind of build yourself up too. It's like, okay, well, I thought I did good on the interview. It's just sometimes you just don't know if who you're going up against. Like,
Right.
that could be a unicorn. Like,
Right. Right.
or they could
Right.
have someone in mind that they want to hire already. Like, you never
Right.
know. But I think it's just best to move on and not dwell.
100%.
Because
100%.
when you dwell, you get in a bad headspace.
I agree. And so, kind of going back to the nature conversation that you mentioned, like what just because emotions are a big part, right? So our cognitive triangle says thoughts lead to emotions lead to behaviors. So when you're in nature, what emotion do you experience that makes you feel like, oh, like is it a relaxation? Is it peace? Is it
I think it's peace, and I feel like time slows down a little bit. So my thoughts, it's not like 10 thoughts are coming in my head. It's just like one slides in. As it slides out, another thought comes in. I feel like I can just think clearer.
I love that. I've never heard it described that way, but I really enjoy it. So like you're just so super present and just
Yeah, just it's everything. Just the
yeah.
smell of the nature, the
Yep.
trees, the dirt, the river,
I love
just the
that.
sound of the river going, just the
Yes.
trees, the wind in the trees,
Yes.
just
And
looking at the vastness of the mountains and
right.
like
And,
just
and
everything, all the senses.
right. And so for those who are thinking about this, reflecting like what does that look like for me? Peace is kind of a standard marker for most of the guests. So as you're doing different things, if you experience peace, that's probably an indicator that that's an important spiritual and self-care practice for you.
Yeah, and
Um,
look at healthy options too. Just like being on TikTok for 12 hours is not healthy. Like that doesn't bring you peace.
Seriously,
Like
never. Oh my gosh. Okay, flow state. Have you ever experienced flow state? And so I define that as you're so engrossed in the present that the activity you're working on feels incredibly easy when it should be difficult, or you're so engrossed you lose track of time. So if people are like, "Oh my gosh, it feels like 15 minutes, but it's been 4 or 5 hours." Have you ever had an experience of flow state before? And can you share a little bit about what that
yeah,
looks like?
so when I was working in digital forensics at the police department, I would just get so engrossed with it because phone data is massive. Like there's billions of pictures, there's billions of files, there's billions of songs, there's a whole lot to go through, and each image has a GPS coordinate with it, time, location, a lot to look at. So you'd be analyzing a phone looking for a needle on the haystack, and you start looking at this thing, and it's like, hey, like, let me see where this goes. And you look around, it's like 5 o'clock already. It's like, oh man, shit, I should have been gone already.
Yeah.
Um, so that's kind of where I would get in flow state, is just digging into something and just kind of my focus was so high on it. Just you just kind of lose track of time and you just you just go down too many rabbit holes.
Mm-hmm.
But some stuff I did for it too is just I would try to prepare like when I did it. Like, okay, well, I'm gonna go through this phone on this day. I'm gonna allot this amount of time. I would have set alarm. I would try to minimize distractions and stuff like that. Like days that I would do it, I would make sure I had fewer tasks. Like, okay, well, don't schedule an interview for this day because I'm gonna be doing this. And really just time management, just
Yeah.
that's some of the stuff I did, but and I still get like that sometimes where I just get so engrossed with it, you just kind of lose track of time. But
Yes. So I love that I asked the question and you came back to digital forensics. And so for the listener, that's a marker of this is probably tied to your life purpose in some way, right? Because it's so a part of that purpose and that destiny that it's easy for you and you get engrossed in it and you lose track of time. So I love that that's where that question went. And so yeah, for you guys, like flow state is not necessarily something you can manufacture on purpose. Now, the examples he gave about lessening distractions and maybe setting a timer to get me out of flow state at the right time so I get home at the right time. Those are all great tools to help maybe create the right environment so that flow state can happen. But typically flow state, it just kind of happens. You can't really force it like some other emotions you can. Okay, so unfortunately we're almost out of time. But can you share? Because I often find memories are important ties to, like, they're almost like little breadcrumbs that take us to what we're supposed to be doing. Did you happen to have any childhood memories that you can think back to now that maybe were a core memory where you're like, oh, I didn't understand why that was a core memory, but now it makes sense in light of the work that I'm doing?
I will say I'm probably gonna age myself, but like working with computer, like having computers when we were younger, like we would have like floppy disks. And I remember playing a game called X-Wing versus TIE Fighter, Star
Yeah.
Wars game. It's like a pilot sim game, but I remember thinking like, oh man, like how they get all this? Like I can go blow up a Star Destroyer. Like how can I do this? And I'd want to take my computer apart, but my dad would be like, no, that's just like fuck, that's expensive. And I was just really interested by it. And, there was one point where I thought I wanted to do video game design, but I'm not really like that artistic. So I can draw stick figures, but like that's about most of my artistic ability. But like I was just naturally curious about computers and tech. Like, how does this work? Like what does that flashing thing do? Like, I just always had a natural curiosity about computers.
I love
And
that. Yeah, the average kid is not like wanting to break down their laptop to figure out
yeah,
how it works. Like that is
right.
definitely is not normal. So that is a really beautiful example. I know I have a ton of memories. One of my favorites is, and I'm going to date myself, but I watched Newsies when it came out in theaters. So it's a Disney movie. It's got Christian Bale, like Batman, right?
Oh yeah, yeah,
And it's a musical, but it's all about the true story of the newsboys of New York City were being exploited by the newspaper. So like the uber wealthy,
yeah.
and they did a strike. And so it's all these like orphaned kids. And I cried for like the entire night. My parents are like, "What's wrong with you?" And I'm like, "The injustice, like these poor kids." And
I
at
think
the
I've
time,
cried at one movie ever, and as embarrassing it is to say, it's Pokemon the first movie.
really? I haven't seen
Have you seen
that.
Pokemon the first movie?
No.
Oh man, I'm not gonna spoil it for you, but it's sad.
Okay, I'm gonna add it to
Pikachu
my
cries,
list.
and
And then Steven cried.
well, to be fair, I was probably like 15, 14,
Hey
but
man, hey, it's all good. I love it because
yeah,
there was a connection there. But
yeah,
yeah, but that's isn't that this what it's all about? And that's actually a really wonderful point to kind of stop is it's all about the connection to ourselves, to each other, to these, whether it's an artistic endeavor that inspires us to break down a computer or causes us
yeah,
to shed a tear in a movie theater, right? It's all about like how do we want to connect with ourselves and with our fellow man? And man, Stephen, this has been amazing. Thank you so
yeah.
much for sharing your insight.
Of
And
course, yeah. I'm glad to be here.
do you have any like last minute parting words for my people that you just want them to remember always?
Keep your spirits up. Like, just because you failed doesn't mean you failed. Like, just keep your spirits on. Just keep pressing forward. Like, just because you hit a speed bump doesn't mean you have to stop. Like, especially if you're pursuing a craft path in cybersecurity, like you're gonna have to network. Just nothing comes easy. Like you're gonna have to work for stuff. Like, but just don't let failure stop you. If
Yes.
you really want it, nothing's gonna stop you.
Yes. And don't ever give up. And I always tell people it doesn't matter how many resumes you've thrown out there, you only need one to get the job. So
Yeah,
to his point, keep at it. Surround yourself with people. Listen to this
get a mentor.
podcast. Get a mentor, right? My key takeaway, man, I had a lot of key takeaways, but I really loved
I
the
had a lot more to
important.
talk about too.
Dude, we might have to do a part two actually.
I'm down
But
for it.
the curiosity part was my big takeaway. Curiosity's always been one of the most powerful tools that I've used as well. And so when I get stressed or get fearful, rather than focusing on the fear, it's converting it to curiosity, right? If I'm new to networking and reaching out on LinkedIn, it might seem stressful, but if I reframe it to, you know what, I'm just curious. I just want to hear about what do you like
Yeah,
about
and
working at that place?
sometimes people will ghost you. Sometimes you'll message people a really clever, funny message, and they'll just not say anything. And it's just don't take it personal. It's just that's their problem. Like,
Yes,
I mean, you're gonna get ghosted sometimes,
100%. And
but just
that's a
don't take
them
it.
problem. That's not a you
Yeah, I
problem.
mean,
Yeah.
communication's a two-way street. Like, I did my part.
Right. Amen. Okay, folks, if you want to connect with Stephen, he's on LinkedIn. We're going to put the link to his profile on the show notes. Thank you so much, Stephen, for coming
Of
on the
course.
show and encouraging and inspiring us today.
No,
I'm
thank you.
super excited. And folks, if you're looking for more resources, if you want to know what your life purpose is, I have a freebie on my website, www.mightysparrowcoaching.com. I have video prompts for you to help guide you, or you can check out my best-selling book, The Least of Us, How Your Imposter Syndrome Points to Your Greatest Power, available at all major book retailers. And you guys, until next time, humble warriors, please remember the world needs who you were made to be. Thank you so much for joining us today on this journey to discover how you can harness your imposter syndrome to work for you. See you next time. Welcome to the Humble Warrior Podcast. I'm your host, Alani Bankhead, and I'm really excited to have Stephen Epting, who is a top cybersecurity voice on LinkedIn. He's also an information security and digital forensic expert, former police detective, and tech enthusiast. And guys, I'm honored for you to be here with us today, Stephen, but I have to warn the audience, we are going to be talking about some sensitive stuff, including child sex abuse, because we both come from that law enforcement space. So if this is too difficult a subject, completely respect it. Find another podcast. But if you are excited to hear about how he overcame this mission set and actually transitioned to do something that was a little bit more heart-led, this is the conversation for you. If you enjoyed this episode and would like some help overcoming your imposter syndrome, check out the free life purpose exercise on my website and subscribe to my blog. If you already know what your life purpose is and are ready to crush or harness your imposter syndrome, then you're going to love my best-selling book, The Least of Us: How Your Weakness Points to Your Greatest Power, available on Amazon and all major book retailers. Or you can hit me up at alani@mightysparrowcoaching.com to discuss private coaching or corporate and government training. That's ALANI@mightysparrowcoaching.com. Listen, there's only ever been one you, and there will only ever be one you. And you have a specific gift to give that the world desperately needs. Don't let your self-doubt be the thing preventing you from living your most joyful and impactful life. Until next time, I'm always cheering you on.